Douglas got the green light for My Childhood, and his number one priority was to get the casting of the two young boys at the heart of the film spot on. He wanted the real thing.
He spent a whole day with me, going around all these organisations, watching all the kids in the after-school clubs, and he still couldn't find what he was looking for. You know, he'd seen dozens of kids, and he left, I always remember, at 5 o'clock. He left to and go up the road to get the bus. And when he came back the next morning, said, "I've found him." When he was standing at the bus stop, these two lads, the two that you see in the film, they asked him for a match or a cigarette. And this is how he got talking to them. And he decided this was the two. And of course, when I saw who it was, my heart stood still. I think
Why? Why did you say that? Why did your heart stand still when you saw who he cast?
We knew them both very well. And Stephen, I mean, he played truant, and it was, they were, it was, he had a lot of problems as well, but he was, I think that day, in fact, he had been playing truant, and he never had a lot to say, you know, but of course you see what he did with him.
Douglas seemed instinctively to tap into something in his young non-professional lead, Stephen Archibald.
A lot of the sadness in the wee boy was Stephen. But the fact was, Bill was a wonderful communicator, and he just knew exactly how to do it, how to give that wee boy confidence, because he had no confidence in himself, you know.
What was Bill like as a director?
I never used to see him with a script, but he must have had a script. He let them, what's the word, improvise. That's right. He was good at talking folk into doing things.
I remember, when he was talking to the actress who played the grandmother, and there was a previous scene that she had shot where she goes across the yard and knocks on the door next door, crying out, "You her," with a knife in her hands. And she said, "Oh, Bill, you didn't tell me," because I don't know what script he gave her, or if he gave her any script. She said, "You didn't tell me, Bill, that my son was having an affair with the lady next door." And he said to her, he said, "How would it have helped you?" He knew that for the screen actor, it's the moment that matters. It equalized, the situation, because although they were these professional actors, they didn't know what the hell they were doing, really, in the whole. I mean, they knew what they were doing at the moment. And so therefore, in a kind of neorealist way, he made them into non-actors.
When he was directing, he wasn't thinking in terms of the meaning of the scene or the sort of dramatic structure of the performance, and it was more a moment, a sort of scar, a frame, which he was trying to recognize. I remember when he stood behind the camera, I think I asked him once, "What are you doing when you're looking, just when you're directing?" He's saying, "I'm just trying to recognize what I saw when I was writing it, really." So it was these very intimate, personal scars in his mind that he was trying to seek when he was directing each shot. So it's actually a different way of telling a story than the average British film, which is story-orientated and not visual. In fact, this kind of filmmaking is more like a painter working alone in a studio, although he does have about 5 or 7 crew standing around. But Bill was basically trying to find his own shot, and it was uncommunicable. I think, but on the other hand, very fulfilling eventually for people, because they realized that they could participate in this creative exercise if they were very sensitive to Bill. So it was rather like listening to somebody who was doing a sort of solo, like Charlie Parker in a jazz band, and trying to find the places that you can contribute with your instrument.
And he was saying, let's look as minutely as possible at what human beings do. And human beings, in his films, there are lots and lots of shots of people just looking, observing, making up their minds, changing their minds, assessing, evaluating, taking the world in. And we watch them taking the world in and sort of bringing it out again. and doing things which are so tiny, of such little significance.
Mamoon Hassan was never credited on Douglas's films, but he was the one with the foresight to see that Douglas's exceptional talent needed protecting and nurturing. How important was Mamoon Hassan to Bill's development as a filmmaker?
Well, I think that might have been the first time that Bill encountered somebody who was wholly committed to him. And the whole trilogy and the idea of making a second and a third was all based on Mamoon's enthusiasm.
I saw the rushes and I was absolutely stunned. I thought, my God, this is not a director, this is an artist. And we've got to give him every chance to work. And I knew what the British film industry was like. It would never give him a break. And sadly, I was proved right. And so I rang him and I said, don't kill Jamie. We'll do a trilogy somehow.
Undoubtedly gifted, Douglas also developed a reputation for being bloody difficult to work with. Perhaps this was down to the rigours of filmmaking, or perhaps it was due to his troubled past.
The thing that I discovered by the time that my Ain folk came round was that in every film somebody had to be sacrificed. It's as if, I mean it is, we're going back to biblical sort of notion of the black sheep. That in the first one, Bahram Manouchery was, the cinematographer who was with him and Mike Leigh indeed, and he shot Bleak Moments for Mike Leigh. Bill made a terrific fuss about him and that he couldn't work with him and so on, and he had to be sacked. And then he felt okay, and Mick Campbell joined as cinematographer. Now on the second one, other people were sacked. And the minute that person was sacked, it's as if the poison had somehow seeped out with the person who was sacked.
Bill said himself I could be difficult, but I think it was because Bill had a passion. He knew what he wanted to make. I mean, it was personal cinema. He already had the film in his head. And if he couldn't get on camera, on screen, what he had in his head, he was a bit distraught. And of course things go wrong. So yes, I think he probably threw his typewriter out of a window at one point in time. He also snatched the film away at the editing stage and the police had to be called. Yeah, they were good times.
Working with Bill was a very trying and difficult thing emotionally. I mean, physically it was very trying, but emotionally it was very demanding and draining. And so how terrible it must have been for him.
Another aspect of Douglas and his films that could be difficult was editing the material as he saw it.
I've never seen any film like the films that he made, in the way that if you cut it a few frames shorter, it sort of had one feeling, and if you cut it longer, it had another feeling. It's as if you were dealing with dynamite. And that came out of the tensions in the shot. I mean, it was very difficult to edit because there wasn't just narrative, and as you know, quite a lot of the narrative is internal. It's not then this happened, and then after that this happened. I mean, it's something happened in the character's head, and he found a way of using cinema to tell you that.
After a decade of intense struggle in the 70s, Douglas completed the trilogy. Quite a bleak portrait of life, many thought. But in truth, one of its main strengths was the sense of optimism and triumph it conveyed.
Now, what Bill would say is, when he was interviewed, he would say, I am, meaning himself, I am the happy ending. The fact that he became Bill Douglas out of this funny little character called Jamie, who had such a bad start in life, he became Bill Douglas. And when I think about it now, going back over those 50 years, it is an extraordinary journey from his background that he was able to achieve so much artistically.
What are your future plans? Is the trilogy going to keep going? Are we going to see more about Bill Douglas on screen?
Well, I would like to do that, but I would like to do other things in between. I think I will pick up a bit later. I just hope that my life continues to be a bit interesting.